Yeah, welcome to a special YouTube edition of Get Paid, your one-stop shop for all things fantasy gambling and daily fantasy. As always, we are proud partners of Underdog Podcasts. Obviously, we are on Underdog TV. If you could do me a favor, hit subscribe on this button. The more you subscribe, we're going to be releasing a ton of content. Two new shows I think are going to set to be premiering next week, at least one, which we're going to be doing an offshoot of this Get Paid show, which is going to be called The Pick Six. That will be debuting next week. But today, I want to talk about preseason week 3. I know I'm a little bit late here, but thanks to the freaking Andrew Luck situation, which we'll get to later, I had a lot to react to in my Fantasy Football Almanac and Draft Guide, getting those updates out to the readers. So what I'm going to do is just go game by game and team by team within those games for any insights that I got throughout the week. For all my readers of the Fantasy Football Almanac and Draft Guide, I always give them a little preseason scouting report. Scouting, when I say that, I'm talking about fantasy football scouting, not scouting. I don't care about the third offensive tackle for the Atlanta Falcons, but we'll get through it. So first game I have is Washington versus Atlanta. First and foremost, Case Keenum has been the best quarterback all off season for Washington. I said as soon as Washington drafted Haskins, is like, look, the dude has talent, obviously, but he hasn't started a ton in college. Both Grudens like veteran stability and quarterbacks that can take care of the ball in their offense. Their schemes are pretty strong in the National Football League. It's widely reported that Jay Gruden's offense is considered a top 5 offense in the NFL. So the offense does quite well, right, when they have a good quarterback throwing the ball. Keenum, I've been seeing all offseason, I think he is basically the equal of Alex Smith. I think he's going to throw more interceptions, but I also think he's going to throw the ball downfield more. So what you're going to get is a little bit more turnovers than Alex Smith had last year before his injury, but you're also going to get more big play potential down the field. My big issue with Washington this season is the receivers. Jordan Reed just got another concussion. Unfortunately, he's been in the concussion protocol quite a bit over these last few years of his career. Keenum, who is he going to throw the ball to? I don't like McLaurin. I don't like Dotson. I think Paul Richardson's probably the best of those receivers. Jamison Crowder now is gone to the Jets, so it's going to be a process in Washington, but we'll see how it goes. The great news for Washington fans and fantasy footballers alike is Geis came back, and he looked fantastic as a running back. He has great vision. I think, in that limited action that I saw in preseason game 3, I think he's definitely superior to Adrian Peterson, who, by the way, is still pretty good. So I think, Geis separated himself in that competition. I wouldn't even say it was a competition, but, he showed up on film. He met the hype. So I've moved him up in my rankings, and I think you all should move him up in yours as well. As for Atlanta, they wasted a fake punt on their first possession, which I thought was funny for them to put that on tape for the regular season. Look, Washington's defense, they were up and down early. Atlanta did what they wanted to do. Matt Ryan still looks a little rusty to me, and I think we're going to see that as NFL fans. I think, quarterbacks and offenses across the league, because there hasn't been a lot of playing starters in the preseason here, I think a lot of these offenses are going to be rusty to start the season. If you're a gambler, you might want to be leaning towards the under in a lot of these games for the first 2 to 3 weeks of the season. Atlanta, I think their offense is going to be high-powered. I do notice that Ito Smith, the backup running backs come in with the starting unit. Freeman is still getting snaps, but, as I've been saying these last couple of weeks, a Dirk Cutter offense typically doesn't make a stars out of running backs from a fantasy point of view. I don't see this season as any different. I think Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley are the ones to own, and I also like Austin Hooper, who I don't know what he's put on his hands, but everything is sticking to them. He's made a ton of tough catches in preseason games this year. Remember, Cutter had Cameron Brate score quite well in fantasy and daily fantasy. O.J. Howard, obviously. I think Austin Hooper could be the next tight end to kind of pop out. He also had Tony Gonzalez back in the day in his first run in Atlanta. So I do like what Atlanta's putting together there on offense, specifically the passing offense. Next is the Giants. I got to say, Eli Manning looks better than you would expect him to. He looks pretty dialed in. I think that's what happens when they draft your heir to your job, a guy who's competing. Daniel Jones has looked really good in the offseason as well, but I don't think Manning is relinquishing this starting job. I think Jones might start later in the season, as the Giants get eliminated, but this is going to be a better team than people think. I think their defense is improved. While their problems and challenges at wide receiver are well documented, Golden Tate's going to miss some time. Shepard looks like he'll be back. Coleman is out for the year. But really, this offense, I think, is going to run through Saquon Barkley. Manning is going to have some receivers schemed open. I think Pat Shurmur is a little underrated as an offensive coach and as a head coach. And I think Ingram is going to be really good at tight end. I've moved him up in my rankings this week. The Bengals offense, I think they'll be pretty sharp. Boyd, I think, is creating separation. He didn't have a great stat line in this game, but he looks like he's going to be good even while A.J. Green is still recovering from injury. So I'm not hesitating on picking Boyd this year. I think Mixon is going to be great. I think Dalton will be okay, but I'm looking more as a daily fantasy option, not necessarily a fantasy starter option. He's more of a backup in fantasy football, in my opinion. The Ravens versus the Eagles, really nobody played any starters in this game, so there's not really anything to glean other than Baltimore's defense. Even their backup players are fast. They have depth there. They're going to be a strong team, and I continue to like Lamar Jackson. We just didn't see him this week. Carolina versus New England, we did get starters in that game. Unfortunately, Cam Newton is banged up. I had to move him down in my rankings again. He's questionable for week 1. The one thing I noticed about Cam is he looked really skinny, and I didn't think he was skinny because he lost weight. I got the impression that he was skinny because he spent the offseason basically rehabbing. I'm a little concerned about that because he's such a physical player. I'd hate for him to, for those hits to ring a little bit more. And he's getting a little bit older as well. I know he's still a young guy, but, that stuff tends to carry, you carry that along with you throughout the season when you get a little bit older. He's a little bit more slender. I'm concerned about his durability, but as an offense, Christian McCaffrey is going to be great. I didn't really see a lot. I think DJ Moore played like a little bit better than I'd seen him in preseason, but I really think Olsen is your sleeper there. He's not drafted particularly high, but when he's been healthy and Cam Newton have been healthy at the same time, they have a lot of touchdowns between the two of them. So he's somebody you want to look out for, especially in the daily fantasy circles as well. New England's offense looked great. We know that they have Josh Gordon back. He's going to be a factor. But the real thing is, man, Sony Michel looked so good. I had to move him up in my rankings. I mean, he had such great vision, great explosion. I think he's going to be a stud. Standard leagues, PPR leagues, every kind of league, I think he's going to be good. Now, look, he's going to come out in receiving downs. James White is still going to be there. Damian Harris is going to have something to say in that offense as well. But, man, Michel looks really, really good. I think he's the best running back they've had in a while. And that is a really good running back group, I'll say, with the rookie in there and James White there now. Green Bay and Oakland, they didn't play a lot of starters. If you watched Hard Knocks this past week, you'll see that they played like on an 80-yard field, which is kind of goofy. But I don't know what to think about that game. I mean, if they're not playing starters, it's hard to see. I still like Aaron Jones, but this is a lot of projection. We don't really know what the scheme's going to look like with the starters in there, but we'll find out in about a week, 2 weeks here. Let's see, Jacksonville versus Miami. We saw Fournette and Foles. They both looked a little bit rusty, but Foles was keeping the team on the field. I think the big thing here, there's two. First, D.D. Westbrook was getting like every other passing attempt. He got a ton of targets and not very much playing time. I moved him up there. I think he's definitely a big value sleeper and a nice early season daily fantasy play for you as well, even if he's not getting in the end zone. And I think Jacksonville might still struggle to get in the end zone this season. I think he'll get you catches and yards, so he'll be like a PPR monster. He could be anyway, I should say. But the good thing, though, I think if you're a Jacksonville fan or if you've recently drafted this defense is at all levels, first, second, third string, this defensive line is dominant. They're fast. The defensive backs we know are very good. They basically impose their will on the Miami Dolphins throughout the game. I mean, they look fantastic. And if Foles can just like maybe convert an extra maybe 10 to 20% of the third down conversions that probably Bortles should have converted last year, this is going to be a team that's tough to beat. I mean, they're going to win. If teams don't score, 20 points against them, they're going to have a chance in pretty much every game. And now with Andrew Luck retiring, that division's wide open. It's going to be interesting. So if you're a fan of Jacksonville's defense, I do think they'll return to form this year because I do think the offense will have improvement. Miami, look, I think Josh Rosen is the better of the quarterbacks there. But if I'm Miami, I say this every week, I would still start Fitzpatrick. Let Rosen sit and have an understudy year. Let him have a redshirt year. The Cardinals wasted his rookie season this year. He's learning his second offensive system in 2 years. This is his third offensive coordinator because the Cardinals fired Mike McCoy in the middle of last season. if you're Miami, just be stable. Don't ruin this guy's confidence by throwing him out there before he's really ready. And Miami's offensive line, I mean, he's running for his life. The quarterbacks are running for their life. I don't love it. The running backs didn't do anything, but I think it's more because of Jacksonville's dominance than it was this team is going to be bad all season. But they definitely, as an organization, have some improvements to make. Cleveland versus Tampa. Cleveland, they didn't play any of their starting receivers. They didn't play Chubb at running back. Baker Mayfield didn't look great, but I think his timing was off. He was playing with a lot of younger receivers. We haven't seen Beckham or Landry. This is going to be a different offense, so I'm kind of punting on the analysis. I think Baker's going to be just fine. I think Chubb is fantastic. The limited time he did play this preseason, he looked just incredible. And then we'll see what the passing game does. There's a lot of options there. But Tampa, they look good. Peyton Barber moved up my draft board as well. He gets really the big snaps with the first team. The thing is, I was thinking Ronald Jones might come in and be the pass-catching back, but his pass blocking in games so far has been so bad. I think he runs the risk of not really seeing the field that much, and Peyton Barber really just running away with a high percentage of the snaps. That primarily is why I moved Barber up. I think from a ball carrying and maybe a pass receiving point of view, Jones might be the stronger back, but an all-around game with, when you have to pass block and read blitzes and all this stuff, I think Barber might be the better one. Plus, I think he's the better short yardage back, so I think he'll be the better fantasy player as we move forward in the offseason. Bills versus Lions. We got our first look at the full starting backfield and everything for the Lions. Stafford played. Kerryon Johnson continues to impress me. I know there's some talk about C.J. Anderson. I'm going to say this again. C.J. Anderson looks a little overweight. C.J. Anderson doesn't really get in on key snaps. He came in as a third down back, but I don't see him as an improvement on third downs to Kerryon Johnson. There's going to be a little bit of a split here, but I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 committee at all. Kerryon Johnson is probably the best offensive player on that team. We haven't seen Galladay really perform, but the reports are still great out there. Just remember, this is a Bevel system, a Darrell Bevel system. The system wants a running back. I said this last week. I think Kerryon Johnson, and I think he's being drafted in the third round right now. I think he's a fantastic pick. Wherever you can get him, third round is great value in my opinion. Buffalo didn't look fantastic. McCoy looked okay. Josh Allen didn't look as good as he looked in the first 2 weeks of the offseason there. McCoy and Gore were switching off snaps. Even Devin Singletary got in on the action, got a touchdown late in the game. This running back situation is a little bit murky for me, so I'm going to stay away from it. But I still do like Beasley as a sleeper, although he didn't really pop on film this week. Arizona versus Minnesota. The great thing for Arizona is that Kyler Murray did push the ball downfield. I've been, especially after the Raiders basically crashed up and took those quick outs away. I was really worried that Murray wasn't really going to be able to stay in the pocket and throw downfield for a few weeks until he got acclimated. But Arizona adjusted. They push the ball downfield, and that just makes me feel better. Once they do that, running lanes start opening up for David Johnson. Honestly, if I saw another week of Kyler Murray just throwing 2-yard outs and all that, I would have had to move David Johnson down in my rankings. But I hesitated to do that. I wanted cooler minds to prevail. I waited a week, and I saw what I needed to see from Kyler Murray. Look, it's going to be a process, right? But he's so fast. If he can stay healthy, he has a lot of talent. He was making really good, strong throws. He didn't complete a lot of them downfield, but their willingness to push the ball and challenge the secondary of a good Minnesota team, it helps. So I'm more optimistic now with the Cardinals, and I still think this passing game with Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald, I think there'll be great options in the passing game, and David Johnson will have more value in PPR leagues because I think he'll be catching a lot. Minnesota, Cousins took a deep shot early, overshot Stephon Diggs deep. Thielen didn't play. Dalvin Cook looked really, really good. I still think Madison will get in. I still think Madison will get his touches just like Latavius Murray did in years past, but man, Dalvin Cook looked good. So I moved him up, I think, a little bit in the rankings as well. You got Houston versus Dallas. Big news is Lamar Miller, hurt himself. That's a bummer. That's a bummer if you're a Texans fan. Between Luck retiring, Lamar Miller getting hurt, like I said, this AFC South is wide open. I think Duke Johnson is your odds-on favorite to get most of the carries. I don't see Houston trading for anybody just because they gave up what will be a third-round pick, I think, for Duke Johnson. I think it was a fourth that upgrades to a third with playing time, and I'm sure Duke Johnson will meet that qualification in the trade. So I don't think they're going to be, making a big splash for like a Zeke or Gordon. I've seen that out there. Are they going to trade for Zeke? Are they going to trade for Gordon? The answer is no. I don't think they're going to give up many more draft picks. But what I am curious about is, who gets waived this weekend. Pay close attention because I don't love Tywan Jones. I don't look like really anybody else on that depth chart there. So, if Washington loves Geis and they get rid of Adrian Peterson, I don't think that'll happen. But if something like that happens, you never know, man. Maybe Peterson will be running first and second down and Duke Johnson will be the passing guy. That would make a lot of sense. But we'll see what happens. Dallas, on the other hand, they had 2 early targets to Gallup. Gallup got a touchdown pass a little bit later. He's looking really good. I bumped him up. I saw some tape on him last year. Somebody sent out like a trolling video of Dak Prescott missing deep passes to wide open receivers. Well, the wide open receiver was Gallup time after time after time. He's going to be open deep this year. I think he's going to be viable. Amari Cooper is going to be drawing coverage. He's a nice sleeper for me and a good early season daily fantasy budget play. I think he could get 1 to 2 touchdowns a game for the first couple weeks of the season. Man, he's pretty good. Pollard looked okay. He's moving the chains. I've had to move him up. I've had to move Zeke down in my rankings. This holdout is getting under control. It's getting contentious. I still think Zeke will get in somewhere in the first 4 games of the season because Dallas needs him to win the Super Bowl. They really do. But that Melvin Gordon situation, man, that could go the whole season. We'll get to him in a bit. We have Chicago versus Indianapolis. Did any big news come out of it? I didn't. No, obviously Andrew Luck retired. That was just huge, devastating to Colts fans. Let me say this. Everybody, it's been well reported, the Luck stuff, it's a surprise, blah, blah, blah. I had Luck projected at 40 touchdowns. I had this offense really highly projected. Brissett spent last year on the bench learning from a very good offensive coach in Frank Reich. I think he'll be ready to play. Honestly, I don't think the Colts are a playoff contender this year, but I still think that Brissett could give you like 25 touchdown passes, 13 interceptions, something like that. The offense will still move the ball. Marlon Mack will still move the ball. I've had to downgrade these guys a little bit just because the luck factor hurts, Funchess and Hilton and Ebron and Doyle and all these, Campbell, Paris Campbell. It hurts all of them, but I don't think this is going to be a bad team. It's not like 5 years ago when the Colts were just barren behind their quarterback. Peyton Manning, when he went down, they got the first pick in the draft. When Andrew Luck went down, I think they went like 4-12, right? That's not this team anymore. They have a good offensive line. They have good, backup supporting players. And Brissett, I'm curious to see how good he is because he did spend that year. He did have a year with Jeff McDaniels and Bill Belichick. He has starting experience. He could be all right. So, I don't think all is lost for Indianapolis. Obviously, it's a huge blow, but there is reason to think that Brissett could be okay. Maybe they open a playoff window next year, the year after that, but this isn't a bad team. So they're building, they're doing it the right way. It could be okay. Chicago didn't play in either starters, so there's nothing really noteworthy there. The Saints versus the Jets. The starting Saints offense looks incredible. The starting Saints defense, they still are blocking and stuffing the run. They look great. They're my NFC favorites to make the Super Bowl this season. Then you have the Jets. Ty Montgomery looks good. He looks like a poor man's version of Le'Veon Bell, which makes sense, right? Because they have Le'Veon Bell starting. Montgomery, I think he's going to be a good backup. The first team offense had a tough time getting anything going against the Saints, but I do like Robbie Anderson and Enunwa for their draft value. Herndon because he's first of all, he's a tight end in Gase's system. Outside of Julius Thomas, nobody's ever really produced there. I think it's going to be a while before Herndon has anything to say from a fantasy point of view. But look, your main, I think, sleeper there because everybody's on Anderson. I'm going to say it again. I like Enunwa and his chemistry with Josh Darnold. You have San Francisco versus Kansas City. Garoppolo looked much better. The interesting thing is that running back, I don't really see anybody running away with this. Coleman, got to start. Breida looks better to me, and McKinnon, we haven't seen him because he's still recovering from that ACL tear. It wouldn't shock me if McKinnon, comes in halfway through the season and runs away with the job, but I think this is going to be a committee, honestly, between Coleman and Breida. They're both getting time with the first team. Like I said, Breida just looks a little bit more explosive to me. Coleman, I know he has some time with Shanahan in Atlanta and all that stuff, but what can you say? I mean, the tape doesn't lie. Breida looks a little bit better in gameplay. Dante Pettis looks really good. He's putting up some good numbers. He was looked at quite a bit by Garoppolo this past week against Kansas City, and I think he's going to be good. And I still am high on Deebo Samuel and Jalen Hurd. In Kansas City, holy moly, man, their offense is good. Just draft every Chief you can get. I mean, I don't think Sammy Watkins. I still think Hardman is going to take over that kind of the second receiver role. But there's just so much talent. Damian Williams, by the way, everybody's asking me kind of like, hey, what's going to happen with the Kansas City running back situation? Everything I've seen, I know that the reports, Damian Williams had his hamstring issue and all that, but he just looks so much better than Hyde, and he's so much more versatile in the passing game. I know they have youngsters there that are trying to come up, but I still think this is Damian Williams, running away with most of the snaps. And don't forget, even Kareem Hunt came out from time to time, right? Even Kareem Hunt came out for Chikandrick West and Spencer Ware. I'm sure that Damian Williams will be spelled occasionally, but he's going to be the guy just like Kareem Hunt was the guy, so I'm moving with that. Denver versus the Rams, nobody played. The only note here is Denver's defense still looks incredibly strong to me, but the starters just weren't playing, so nothing of note there. You have Seattle versus the Chargers. Chris Carson looks like incredible as a starting running back. Penny looks more like an afterthought in this offense, although he did put some really nice plays together this week. But still, I think this is Carson's job. Wilson to Lockett, that combination looks really good. He trusts Lockett. Lockett can get separation, so I think Lockett will be a nice receiver this year. The Chargers, there's no Rivers. Eckler started, but as he was involved early, he didn't really have a ton of blocking, but I do think he's going to be fine. And like I said before, I think this Gordon holdout, it's getting ugly. This thing to me could last at least until week 9. I think you have to really take Eckler seriously as a starting running back, just like people should have taken James Conner seriously to start the year last year. So if you're out there and Eckler's on waivers for any reason, snap him up. If you haven't drafted yet, if you do draft Gordon, make sure you get Eckler as a handcuff. Then lastly, Pittsburgh versus Tennessee. Travis Henry's not playing. Mariota got the start. Didn't look incredible to me, although his stat line is kind of misleading because he did put some perfect balls on receivers and they dropped them all. So it's a bummer there. Pittsburgh, we saw Big Ben this week. We saw Connor. We saw basically the offense in full stride, and they look really good. Pittsburgh is ready. For the first time in a long time, they're not talked about as the clear-cut division winners there. I think they're playing with a chip on their shoulder. I think it was addition by subtraction getting Antonio Brown out there. You have Roethlisberger. They're a tighter-knit group. Juju Smith-Schuster looks fantastic. He looks like he can carry the load now that Brown is gone. It's a good system. James Conner looks like a 3-down back. He's really high on my board, higher than the average draft position. And the big note here is Moncrief versus Washington for that second receiver job. I will say this, Moncrief got the start, and he got a lot of targets early, and he looked pretty good. I still think James Washington is the more explosive player. I think he'll have something to say. But this might be like a couple years ago when Bryant there got Martavis Bryant got some deep passes. I see Washington at least early on taking that kind of Martavis Bryant role where he's just getting deep touchdown passes quite a bit, but maybe the move the chains kind of guys are going to be Smith-Schuster and Moncrief. We'll see how this shakes out early in the season, but have Moncrief on your radar. I know Washington is already on your radar, but move Moncrief up in the draft board. I don't think you'll be sorry. So there you go. There's a quick kind of rambling, hopefully not rambling too bad, summary of preseason week 3. If you could, once again, everybody subscribe to the YouTube video. Also check out the podcast. If you go to theunderdogsports.com, you can get to it. There's a link in the show notes below too. Get to the Get Paid podcast where we analyze the fantasy football matchups all season long. There's a lot of good stuff in there, and then we're also going to be unveiling that Pick 6 podcast and YouTube video as well. So once again, subscribe. Thanks for the time. Be good.